Can I get a good amen in this house?
Ready to roll?
We'll do part 2, and part 2 begins now.
Part 2. All right, so we're gonna take a quick break, and we're back. All right. So, and this does really tie into a lot of what we've been talking about already, because there is so much anxiety in kids and students at such an early age. And so, and you guys have been, and we're going to be careful as we're talking about this, sharing your kids' journeys, is walking through some of these things. And so we're going to be very intentional about that. But I just want to hear you guys' perspective of obviously here at Open Door, we talk about inner healing a lot, something we value a lot and push people towards. But you guys have been walking this out in even how you parent with your kids. I want to hear some of your perspective on that. Why you felt like there was a need for that at an early age, and the benefits of starting at an early age.
Ooh, you start.
You want me to start?
Yeah, you start.
Yes, I think it's important to build a healthy theology around our makeup for a minute, and so I don't want to get too heady for everybody, but the Bible's clear about before your mother and father knew you, Christ formed you. I formed you in the womb. And so really realizing that children hear in the womb. They hear the voice of their parent. I mean, that's why they come out trusting their parent, especially their mother. I mean, it's a wonder. It's a wonder. I mean, it is a beautiful thing. But if that's true, which we all believe the Scripture is true, then I believe the enemy starts trying to sow lies in our children in the womb. And so I think that we all are born into sin, is what the Scripture says. I know that everybody who's a brand new parent thinks their child's perfect, but they're a sinner.
Doesn't take long for you to realize that.
No, it doesn't.
I always say they are sent here to destroy marriage. Anyway, I'm just kidding. I'm just playing. The intimacy of marriage is gone. So I think that we have to realize as parents, and I think one of the greatest fears in parents is if we do everything right, then we're going to raise perfect kids. And if we do anything wrong, then we're going to break our kids forever. I think that really takes out of the equation that we actually have an enemy who is absolutely trying to destroy them. The other thing is that, speaking kind of in depth about that, a lot of people say, well, I'm fighting the devil. Well, the truth is, I think very few Christians have ever encountered him. He's not omnipresent. He's not omniscient. So very few people have actually ever encountered Satan. And so obviously there's the demonic. That's a part of that. But we kind of, Satan's just limited in his power. I mean, why would he worry with us? I mean, and I don't mean that sounds really crazy, but the truth is, Satan's really consumed with trying to bring about his will through governments and people who have major, major influence. And so a lot of the ways in which Satan wins or impacts our lives is because he sows a lie that he knows will produce fruit in a life later on. Mm-hmm. And then he's not worried about it.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying? So if he can sow a lie in a kid's life, or a lie is sown in a kid's life, and I would also say that Satan's very little worried about it because he knows that we're born into sin and life happens. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot of things that end up becoming cycles in our life or thought processes in our life that it's more of a product of the fallenness of creation and the world than it is about something direct, an attack from Satan.
Yeah.
And so when you really begin to realize that, you're like, okay, instead of saying as a parent, this is kind of our theory, and you probably have a lot to add to it, but what we've kind of come to realize is, hey, it's not whether I'm going to jack up my kid. My kid is jacked.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so it's just kind of a realization of that's the way it is. And so the way a lie becomes so ingrained in someone is it's allowed to exist for a long period of time. So if I wait till I'm 30 to go get inner healing, right, I've got a lot of life to dig through to get to that lie, to get to that root.
That's right.
I think if you get to it earlier on in a kid's life, then it has a lot less time to produce fruit in that kid's life. And so for us, it's really important, somewhere around 8. I think that's been a good age for our boys. We really start trying to help them learn the skill of finding the root lies in their life that they believe. And most of that comes through trauma. So most of the lies happen in a moment of trauma. And trauma doesn't have to be something crazy bad. Trauma can just be life. I mean, trauma can be in a moment where they lie or something like that, and the enemy comes in and says, you're terrible, or you should feel all this shame. You know what I'm saying? So it's not really, you'll be surprised at the places that the enemy's able to grab a hold of that happen. But the sooner we can get to that, the less time it has to produce fruit in our life. And as parents, I feel like that's the best gift we can give our kids. Is like, hey, let's go find it. And I want it to be normalized in my kids' lives that they get help.
Yep.
Like I want it to be a normal function that they never feel weird walking into a counselor or a therapist or an inner healing. Like I never want it to feel weird to them. I never want it to be strange to them. I want it to be like a normal life rhythm for them, that we're just going to be healthy. And it's meant a lot to Lauren and I, that learning this later on in our life, and grateful for what my parents taught me. We've probably stepped into it a lot more than even they did on a regular
Well,
rhythm.
it was, I didn't grow up going to counseling and never saw my parents do it. And so it was very foreign to me. And so when I met Aaron and his family, that was kind of this is what we do and this is how we stay healthy. And so I think for Aaron and I, it's been important to not just model that for our kids, but also, invest in them in that way. And so, we talk about being healthy all the time. And you have to be mentally healthy, spiritually healthy, emotionally healthy. Yeah. And so that takes just as much work, if not more work, focus on that. And it's not convenient.
No.
There's never a convenient time to do it.
Yeah.
And it's always, I think for somebody who does it later on in life, it's scarier than what you want to admit it is. I think for our boys, because we did start it at such a young age, it's just their normal, like they're just used to it. And now they look forward to going. Yeah. And so Aaron kind of utilizes that time and makes it like a guy's trip. And so it has a fun component to it. So it's not just, we're going to go talk to so-and-so and you need to air out all your dirty laundry. I think as a parent, being on the other side of that, the first time we did it with Wesley, it was you feel very vulnerable, because you're trusting someone to talk to your kid. And then you're like, well, what are they going to say?
You cried.
I totally cried.
You fell apart.
It was, because there was a moment in time where we sat down with him and the counselor said, well,
and he was 8. So this was when Wesley was 8.
Yeah, he was 8. David was around the age of 2 at the time. And so we were navigating all kinds of, just young parenting stuff in general. And I think my wrong assumption was, because Wesley was dealing with some anxiety and just some stomach issues, and knowing, we did all the due diligence and finding out it wasn't a medical thing. It really was just anxiety that was causing the issues. And so I had thought it was one thing, dealing with all of David's health issues and, David or Wesley, seeing some things, happen with his brother and not knowing how to do it.
Well, there was one moment that we had to rush David into the hospital, and truth be told is we were scrambling to get him in, and it ended up that Wesley got left in the waiting room because he couldn't go back. And literally David was on the precipice of not breathing. And so we were rushing him back, and I'll never forget running around the corner, looking behind me, and Wesley just standing there by himself as the doors to the emergency room shut.
Yeah. He's 7.
Yeah, he's 7. And immediately Lauren and I were like, well, he's jacked up. That just there it is. But it was so funny because what you're saying is it wasn't that.
Yeah. So, understanding, okay, well, this is some anxiety. As a mom, I'm assuming, it's linked to this experience. And so, we made the appointment and we sat down with him, and the counselor said, well, Wesley, we're just going to talk some, we're going to pray some together. And, it's totally up to you. Your parents can stay in here with you, or, if you, just want to talk, just us, they can step out, they'll be right outside the door or whatever. And so Wesley very quickly was like, they can leave. And I was like, oh,
And Lauren was like,
your heart just sinks. And you're like,
we messed him
oh
up
my
so bad he doesn't
gosh.
want to be with us.
It was just, that was traumatizing.
What's he going to say about our parenting? We beat him yesterday.
And this is not someone like, Aaron's had a relationship with this counselor, and I have been to him too for years.
Oh, yeah.
So this is not someone that, we just met, casually.
Yeah.
This is a big moment. And so we step out of the room, and, Wesley's back there talking. And I'm like pacing. I'm looking at my clock. I'm like, okay, well, surely after 15, 20 minutes, he's going to come walking out.
He can't be that jacked up.
And it was like an hour later, and I'm like getting teary. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is worse than what I thought it was. And
He's really that broken.
it was really terrible.
He's going to hate us
It
forever.
was awful. And I'll never forget it as long as I live. And this is, I think, what really was where this is going to be a rhythm, is because he walked out of the room and like his whole eyes looked different.
Yeah.
His total demeanor was different.
And you could tell like he had truly encountered God in that room, and like there was a level of healing. And so after, we came back in the room and talked to the counselor, and the counselor was really good about, trying to keep private what needed to be private, but also as parents, explaining. And he just said, it's never what you think it is. He said, it's the small things.
Yeah.
And as a mom, it was just that reality of like, oh my gosh, going back to what you were saying, it's just not giving the enemy time enough to, give that lie.
Yeah.
Just time to just like so deeply in his heart. And so it was a great experience all around, but I think that's why it has been such a priority and value for us, is it's, we have to always work on ourselves individually as a married couple, but also with our boys, just making it normal for them to just keep going back into the presence and having somebody help navigate those times.
Yeah. And David is 8, so he just went his first time. And David's a totally different kid. Wesley's a really old soul. He's kind of always been like that. So I was kind of curious to see how's David going to do with this. And, every theory should be checked a few times. And so, you have one and you go through it. And Wesley's been going every year since he was 8.
Yeah,
and
so
it's been really
almost
good.
7 years.
It's basically what she's saying. The transformation with Wesley every single time. Every single time he walks out lighter. You can just feel that. It's really sweet. And so David, I took him this time. Lauren didn't go because we were doing a guys trip, and it came time. And part of it was because his brother had talked to him about it, and his brother does it. So like he was excited to be at that age to do it. But he goes in, and
but he's also very different, I think, just personality-wise. He's more
creative.
He is very creative, but he's also not. Wesley's never met a stranger.
Yeah.
Never.
Wesley will say.
David's very shy.
He is.
Yeah.
And he's very private, and you really have to
Very
get
private.
to know him.
So I was like, man, I wonder how this is going to go. And it was a 2-hour session. And literally David came out, and he came just jumping out and jumped in the car, and I was like, well, how did it go? He's like, I loved it, Dad. And that's not like him. Like David's not that one who's just going to say that to say it. And I will say, because he is 8, and so I'll disclose this, but I was like, what did you talk about? Because I had some thoughts. I was like wondering what this is going to be. Maybe this goes back to when he was so sick, or something like that. And he shocked me. And I said, what did y'all talk about? He said, we talked about Bop Bop a lot, which is my dad. And some things that I felt when Bop Bop died.
Yeah.
And like David was like 5-ish when Bop Bop died. Maybe, 4.5. He was like 4.5. And so it shocked me that in a moment of just natural transition in life, the enemy doesn't play fair.
That's right.
And so, as much as we've talked about, I think on the previous podcast with social media, guard the doors, right? We also have to realize that the enemy doesn't play fair. So you can guard every door. You can guard every avenue into their life, and somehow the enemy is going to find an opportunity to sow a lie.
That's right.
And so as parents, it's just saying, hey, we're not going to be scared of reality. Reality is our friend. Let's help our kids dig up these lies and navigate them so they don't take root in their life and have expression. So I tell parents, always, like Lauren said, check, physical stuff. But one of the great revelations that I'm chewing on lately is Jesus says, he gets asked what's the greatest commandment, and his response is love the Lord your God, right? But he says something very strange. He says with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. He lists 4 things. Mm-hmm. And what's weird about that is your heart, that's your inner man, which that's great. Your soul is your mind, will, and emotions. So he literally says mind twice.
Yeah.
So love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, and your strength. And so what I believe he's speaking to, which is incredible, is the 4 quadrants of your life, not just 3. And so usually what we're dealing with is our heart, our soul, and our strength. Instead of realizing our processing has a lot to do with our hormones, and we feel before we think. Mm-hmm. And that has a lot more to do with the hormonal health of our body than it does so what I would say is there's a lot of Christians today that are finding it difficult to make strides the way they want to spiritually because something is off in their body. And when Jesus is saying, love the Lord your God with all of you, he's saying, listen, you've really got to pursue health in these 4 areas of your life, not just in your spiritual health. You know what I'm saying? Not just in your heart. And so I really do feel like, and healthy is that's going to mean different things for different people. But for Lauren and I, it's really hoping to teach our kids. I want all 4 of these to be healthy in your life, not just one aspect. And so just really chewing on that and allowing that. And so, we see doctors that help us with that. We see counselors that help us with that. And obviously we pursue Jesus, but God is interested in your whole person being healthy, not just one aspect of your being. And there's a lot of people today that they're finding it hard to make strides in one place, and they keep thinking, well, it's something broken there. And it's actually nothing broken there. Mm-hmm. It's actually something off somewhere else. Yep. And if we begin to look at that as a holistic type thought process in a healthy way, then it really can change our life. And that's really what it means to help our kids navigate the world that they're living in. Let's get them healthy. Yep. And let's hopefully, as best we can, keep them in that place, and then introduce them to rhythms that keep them healthy.
Mm-hmm. How would y'all say? Because I think there's a stigma behind allowing others, especially when they're kids growing up, to speak into and pour into their life. And I think a lot of times there's this big fear of, if I do this, then it means I really messed up. Mm-hmm. And then there's like so much shame surrounding it of, my kids need therapy, my kids need this. Mm-hmm. What would you say to parents who are kind of walking through some of that?
Oh man. Well, I do want to say this. So I think in an ideal circumstance, to start that at a young age. But I would also say to people listening, I didn't start counseling or therapy until I was in my mid to late 20s. Mm-hmm. So it's just never too late. I think that can sometimes feel discouraging to hear Aaron and I talk about, oh, well, they do counseling with their kids already, and they're 8, and they have it all together.
There's some parents are already hearing that, being like, oh, I've already screwed up. Mine are out of the house. I've already messed it all. No, it's
never too late.
Right. Never too
late.
late.
I don't think, so I just don't want anybody listening to feel like, oh my gosh, I wish I would have done this differently. We all do. Do you want to answer that?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, this is what I would say is that, all I know to do is put it in the context of my own life. And it's what my parents always taught me, and they modeled it for us. There was a day when I did not listen to my father. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to listen to my dad. There's a really famous saying, and it's kind of, it's really dark, but it's actually a theory that psychologists have, and it's this saying. It actually came out of a Hamlet play. My pastor taught it to me. And he said there's 2 sons. There's those who want to avenge their fathers, and there's those that want to kill their fathers and steal their mother's affection. Mm. And I think what we have to realize in the context of all the things that we wrestle with is that there will be an age where, as parents, we become the competition to what our children want. And part of maturing is living in the place of thinking you know more than they do.
Yeah.
I mean, the reality is like every teenager eventually reaches the point that like, man, mom and dad are stupid and I'm the smartest person on the planet.
That's right.
Me and my friends are everything.
Yeah. And the really stupid ones live that way for about the next 15 years through their 20s. You know what I'm saying? And maybe sometimes all the way through their 30s. But the reality is that our kids will not always listen to us. And so my question to parents, and my dad looked at me. I remember one time he looked at me and said, I know you're not going to listen to me. Listen to Clark. Mm-hmm. And I would listen to Clark, because I don't know. I thought more of Clark at the time than I did my dad. And the truth is that Clark was an advocate for my parents.
Just go.
And I would just say, like, that's why youth programs exist. That's why we need to put our kids in places that other young people are pouring into our children, because I know there's going to be a day that Wesley's not going to listen to me. Mm-hmm. And the truth is, I mean, you're right here, and Wesley loves you. I mean, you know what I'm saying? And Lauren and I talk about it all the time, and my hope is that when he won't listen to me, I can push him to you, and he will listen to you, because I trust what you're going to tell him. And I think that helping our kids develop community of adults that are wise in spiritual things too, not just athletic things,
right,
really helps them in navigating these years that mom and dad don't know anything. And so, for us, we want to surround Wesley with wise people that he can go to, that he can talk to, that can help him navigate how he's feeling even towards us. I trust his counselor that Wesley's not going to like me all the time. He's not going to like what I do. I'm going to be angry sometimes. I'm going to yell at him sometimes. And some parents are out there, especially if 1-year-old, saying, I'll never yell at my child. Yeah, yeah, you wait. He'll do a lot of things. And so, realizing that having somebody that is an advocate for us and that stands in the gap, it's so vitally important.
Well, the only thing I want to add to that is, and you've said it before, and I don't know if it's been on this podcast or a different one, but, if Adam and Eve had the perfect parent, which was God the Father, and they still screwed it up. As a mom, that just gives me so much okay, I'm very imperfect. I make mistakes all the time, but it's not about being perfect. I'm not going to be the perfect parent, and just taking that pressure off. Yeah. And realizing we all need.
Yeah, and it's never too late to start. I mean, we all have made tremendous amounts of mistakes, and then yet God in his grace and his mercy, there's just so much to it. But realizing that, hey, we can surround our kids with solid people that really do desire to invest in their life. And it's why I think church is so important. I think that having relationship with students and having young people serving in those areas, just really we're here to be an advocate for the parent. And I need that for Wesley all the time. I mean, and it's such a vital part of what we can do. And so I get it. I get that it can be very intimidating. It was intimidating for us to take Wesley for the first time. But my question is, if you really, this is what I'd say, your parents, more than likely, very few parents intend to screw kids up. Mm-hmm. So more than likely, your parents did the best they could do.
That's right.
How did it work out for you? Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? So at the end of the day, if you're doing the best you can do, you might need to consider that maybe we need some help so that when we mess up, which we will, we've got people there that can help.
Well, and I think it's so good too, and we were talking about this with even in regard to social media. I don't know if this is a part 1, part 2. I don't know how many episodes we're in right here,
but we're wearing the same thing, so we cut these back to
somewhere. But we talk even about social media, but it's what you're talking about there is that these outside voices are going to infiltrate your kids' minds, but you do have as the opportunity as a parent to make those outside voices positive voices.
That's right.
And influential voices that are going to steer your students, your kids towards God, back towards the parents, as opposed to driving a wedge in between them. And I think that's really powerful.
I think it probably really, that's really good. And I think it would probably surprise people. I don't expect Wesley to be on fire all the time. Mm-hmm. I don't. I actually think a lot of that is not even reality. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? So like when we're raising him, there's going to be moments that he's spiritually warmer than others. We're on a pretty good kick right now because we came out of camp, I think, right? But I will say this, Wesley's pretty even keel.
Mm-hmm.
Like Wesley's not that over emotional kid, you know, and so he's pretty even keel about that stuff. And I'm fine with it.
Right.
Like in fact, some of the kids that bother me the most are the ones who are most on fire.
Yeah.
So and what I mean by that is it's unsustainable.
That's right.
So the kingdom calls us to consistency, which is, you know, totally different. And so for me, I want to see health produced in their life, not spiritual mountaintops.
That's good.
So with our students, I want to know that they're healthier being in the program 4, 5, 6 years, and that something's being built in them that's going to help sustain them into college than I am about them having these massive mountaintop experiences. I think the mountaintop experiences are important because we've discovered that God is real.
Mm-hmm.
But the truth is, God can be as real as you want him to be, but if he's not helping us build a life,
Yeah.
then what good is it? And so really teaching them that, hey, some of these rhythms of going to youth group whenever we can, of being involved, of working out hard things, of being disappointed in church, and yet then discovering that our conviction over church trumps our disappointment over church, and how do we navigate people, and how do we navigate relationships, and this is a great training ground of real life. And yet a lot of people come to church and they're like, man, this is going to be perfect all the time. Well, I can guarantee you at Open Door Church, you'll eventually get hurt, not hopefully intentionally, but because people hurt each other. That's just what happens. But it's in that we're teaching Wesley and our family how to navigate life. Mm-hmm. It's beautiful. And if it's done right, then it really helps people learn skills that will help produce fruit in their life later on.
That's so good.
Yeah, man.
Well, I don't know how many episodes this was, but
3.
It might be 3, but it was all good nonetheless. It's always good when we can have
you know what?
everyone's favorite.
We didn't talk about sex though.
That's
darn.
We'll have to just refer to the last podcast with Pastor Lauren.
No, I want to talk about sex.
We can do that
Some
after
more.
sabbatical.
No, I want to talk about it now. Pre-sabbatical sex talk.
So sabbaticals next up, and
I know, man. We're getting ready to take off for a month, like we always do every year. It's been something that the eldership has done and called us to for before I was senior pastor with Dad. And
Part of being healthy.
it's part of being healthy, man.
Being healthy, that's right. That's
People always ask me about sabbatical. I'm like, it's a time that we remember that we are not required to build God's house, but He invites us to help build it. But we aren't necessary in what He's building. So
it's cool. Well, thank you, Pastor Lauren, again for being on.
Anytime.
Thanks, babe.
We're in contract disputes, but one thing's for sure, she's a regular regardless.
That's exactly right.
So if we can pull her full time,
exactly
that's
right.
great. But if not, she's a regular regardless.
Jacob, I love you.
Love you.
Season 1.
Is that a wrap?
Is that a wrap on
I don't think
season
it's a
1?
wrap. I
It's
think we
not
got
a wrap.
more.
Too early.
That's why I don't.
It's pre-sabbatical.
Might not be a wrap for you, but it's out for me.
That's awesome.
All right, brother.